Happy Victory Monday and welcome into Black and Gold Overtime. I'm Riley Holsinger. The Pittsburgh Steelers defeated the Indianapolis Colts 27-20. Pittsburgh moves to 5-3 on the season, and in this one, I was not expecting the Pittsburgh Steelers to win. They were an underdog heading into this game. It was very fitting that the Super Bowl 40 winning team was on attendance for this one. Of course, it being the 20th anniversary of that win to get the one for the thumb, the Lombardi Trophy against the Seattle Seahawks. That was a team that was an underdog, that Super Bowl 40 team. Maybe the biggest underdog in franchise history, maybe the biggest underdog in NFL history. This was a team that had its backs against the wall, much like this current team did with the 2-game losing streak that they were on. And then that Steelers team that won Super Bowl 40 won 8 games in a row, got into the playoffs, were a 6th seed, barely got into the wild card round, and then defeated the Bengals on the road, defeated the Indianapolis Colts on the road, a high-powered offense, much like the one that we saw yesterday, or at least heard about coming into yesterday, defeated the Broncos on the road in the AFC Championship game, and then defeated the Seattle Seahawks to get that one for the thumb, just like I said. That was an underdog team for the Steelers. This current team is an underdog team for the Steelers. Nobody expected Pittsburgh to win this one. Myself included, I'll raise my hand on that one. I did not think Pittsburgh was going to defeat the Colts because if you look at this game on paper, they had one of the worst defenses in the National Football League. They were allowing the most passing yards in the National Football League. They allowed 30 points in back-to-back games, especially as the highest paid defense in the NFL. They were going up against the best scoring offense in the National Football League in the Indianapolis Colts. They were going up against the best rushing attack and the MVP frontrunner in Jonathan Taylor. If the game's played on paper, the Indianapolis Colts win, plain and simple. It's a good thing they're not played on paper. You play them on the field, and that's where the Pittsburgh Steelers dominated in this game. Jalen Ramsey spoke to the team. He was fired up on Saturday. He was urging this team to play with some edge in the game. They did just that. Cam Hayward last week after the loss to Green Bay called out this team's lack of fight. They showed plenty of fight in that game. The Steelers held the Indianapolis Colts, as I mentioned, the best scoring offense in the NFL, to a season-low 20 points. And it honestly should have been less than that. Despite that being a one-touchdown game with that 27-20 final, it never really felt like it was a one-touchdown game, other than in the beginning of the game. The Steelers just manhandled arguably one of the best teams in football heading into that game. The Steelers were in full control of that game until garbage time. That final score honestly should have looked a little bit more like that 27-10 mark that it was until it was later in the fourth quarter, because Pittsburgh, plain and simple, just dominated in this game. I think a lot of that domination starts with everything that the Steelers preach week in and week out. Stopping the run. It was never going to be an easy task against Jonathan Taylor or this Colts offensive line, which is highly regarded across the National Football League with one of the best guards that this game has seen in a long time in Quentin Nelson, an all-pro guy there. But the Steelers answered the call on defense. They needed to answer the call on defense and did that. They limited Jonathan Taylor to 14 carries for just 45 yards on the ground. He was the leading rusher in the National Football League entering this game. He scored 3 touchdowns last week. He's been dominating every team that he goes up against. But the Steelers shut him down. And that made way for the Steelers to get after the Indianapolis Colts with the pass rush. It created second and long, third and long situations that let guys like TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton pin their ears back and rush Daniel Jones. It was the best game that we saw from a lot of those guys. Keanu Benton had one of his best games as a Steeler. He looked really, really good. He deserves credit. Cam Hayward deserves credit. Phenomenal performance by him at the line of scrimmage, just batting down balls. Taking on that challenge of bull rushing Quentin Nelson. TJ Watt deserves a lot of credit. We're going to talk about him a little bit more. Alex Highsmith deserves a lot of credit. Everybody wanted Alex Highsmith to be traded for a wide receiver. He stepped up, 2 sacks, a forced fumble by him. Everybody really got home. Really noticeable effort by the Steelers defense. 5 sacks in the game. I mentioned the 2 from Highsmith. They had 6 turnovers in this game. 5 on defense, 1 on special teams. I mentioned we're going to talk about TJ Watt here. $41 million man. One of the highest paid non-quarterbacks in the National Football League. Everybody was asking after last week, is TJ Watt washed? Was that contract really worth it? To this point of the season, it didn't seem like that. It didn't seem like that contract was worth it. It didn't seem like TJ Watt was the player that we've known for him to be over the past few years with all the dominance that he has shown us in Pittsburgh. He reminded people on Sunday he's still a really darn good player in the National Football League. He got credited by his teammates for his strip sack as the turning point in that game. The Steelers were down 7-0. The Colts were driving in Steelers territory, and TJ Watt answered the call. He got a strip sack on Daniel Jones. It wasn't easy if you go back and watch the replay. It was not an easy play for him to make, but he got that strip sack. The Steelers recovered the ball, and even Aaron Rodgers said it gave them momentum. Mike Tomlin said it gave them momentum. Alex Highsmith said it gave this defense momentum. This was a Steelers team that felt down and out very early on in that game. You heard the boo birds at Acrisure Stadium. You saw the offense not really perform too well in the first quarter. I think they only had like 20-some offensive yards in the first quarter. But that TJ Watt strip sack changed the momentum. It changed the mindset of these players on this team. The offense was able to drive downfield then. Jaylen Warren was able to capitalize. We saw Mike Tomlin be more aggressive and go forward on 4th down a couple times. TJ Watt has been credited for the turning point in that game. And Alex Highsmith says turnovers come in bunches. That is what motivated the team to go out there and force more turnovers. We're going to talk more about this defense. I'm going to hand out Riley's report card on this glorious victory Monday here. A lot of good grades to go around for this defense. Some good grades to go around for the offense, too. This might be the first time that we've seen the Steelers all season play complementary football. As I mentioned, 5 sacks, 6 turnovers from the defense. The offense needed to capitalize on that. It wasn't the prettiest day at the office. Aaron Rodgers will be the first one to tell you that. But they did enough to win. 24 points off turnovers. After that TJ Watt strip sack, it was 24 unanswered points for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this one. The 24 points off turnovers marked the second most for the franchise since 2000. They had a game of 27 or 28 under Mike Tomlin back in 2007. We're going to talk about Riley's report card coming up next. I'm going to hand out my grades for the Pittsburgh Steelers after this one. Stay tuned. You're watching Black and Gold Overtime right here on your home for the Black and Gold Nation. Welcome back into Black and Gold Overtime. Riley Holsinger with you on this glorious victory Monday. The Pittsburgh Steelers defeated the Indianapolis Colts 27-20. As I mentioned earlier in the show, I was not expecting that one bit whatsoever. But you know what? It's a lot more fun to talk about a win. It's a lot more fun to hand out grades after a win. And these are the type of grades that I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to want to put on their fridges, or at least their parents are going to want to put on their fridges. I know Joey Porter Sr. was probably pretty happy with watching Joey Porter Jr. yesterday. He was probably really proud of the effort that he put on near the end of the game there, especially right in front of a lot of his other teammates, a lot of his other colleagues. So let's begin Riley's report card with handing out a grade to the most important position in all of football, the quarterback. I'm going to give Aaron Rodgers a B on this one. You know, it wasn't the prettiest day in the office for Aaron Rodgers. He was the first one to admit that. Wasn't the prettiest day from him. We've seen much better games from him all season long, but he didn't turn over the ball at all. He did a really good job at the line of scrimmage, just barking out signals, trying to correct the Pittsburgh Steelers and put them in the right plays on offense. He was that veteran presence that we knew we were going to get with Aaron Rodgers. And you know what? The day probably looks a little differently if, say, Darnell Washington catches one of those balls on the goal line there and scores another touchdown. The Steelers didn't get any points off of that. They went for it on 4th down and goal, weren't able to get it, or 4th and 3, weren't able to get it. I think Aaron Rodgers' day would look a little bit better if he had another touchdown to go, but you know what? He didn't cost this game at all. He played clean, turnover-free football, and on a day where your defense gives you 6 turnovers, that's all you can hope for, really, in the end. They took and they capitalized the most off of those opportunities that they could. So Pittsburgh and Aaron Rodgers, you get a B on this one. It's a passing grade. It's on the honor roll. I'm a little bit harsher, I guess, on the offense than the defense today. Because for running backs, I'm going to go with a C here. I think Jaylen Warren's 2 touchdowns kind of saved this from being a worse grade. Granted, the touchdowns weren't anything too flashy. He just had the one where he punched it in, and then the other toss where he just got to the edge and ran it in untouched for the touchdown. It wasn't anything too flashy from these running backs here. I think if he didn't get those touchdowns, though, you could be looking more in the D range because it wasn't an efficient day for this rushing attack. The jumbo package didn't really work as well as it did earlier in the season. Jaylen Warren finished with an average of less than 2 yards per carry. He finished with 1.9 yard per carry. Just not really the best day from him with running the ball. I believe he had like 14 carries for 30-some yards. Not really a great day from Jaylen Warren running it. Kenneth Gainwell didn't inspire me too much whenever he was in the game. I did like what Caleb Johnson provided in his limited work. I believe he only got like 5 or 10 snaps. Whatever it was, he looked really good. He showed some pop out there. Hopefully we can see him continue to emerge throughout the season. I like that they decided to get him involved whenever they could, whenever they had a big lead in this game. Pass catchers, same thing. I wasn't too inspired. Partly maybe it's because the expectation should be a little bit higher for that unit whenever you're paying guys like Pat Freiermuth a lot of money. And I get it. Pat scored a touchdown there. Whenever you're paying Jonnu Smith a decent chunk of money. Whenever you're paying DK Metcalf a ton of money. DK only finished with 2 receptions for 6 yards. Not really the best day from him or this unit. I thought Calvin Austin looked really good, though. He set up the Steelers. He led the Steelers in receiving. He set them up in good position to score both times. So I thought Calvin Austin played really well. I thought Darnell Washington showed some flashes as well. But like I said, for Rodgers, that grade might go up a little bit more if Washington was able to catch a touchdown there on the goal line. I think that would have boosted that grade a little bit. The offensive line, I'm going to go with a C+ here. The rushing attack really wasn't there. Pass blocking, I thought, was fairly pretty good. They gave up 3 sacks on the day. I'm really only going to count that as 2, though, because the one late in the game, Rodgers kind of just like took a dive on that one because he wanted the clock to keep running there. He saw nobody open. He figured, you know what, it's better for me to take a sack and 40 more seconds come off the clock than me throwing an incompletion, giving the Colts more time on the clock. So I agree with what Rodgers did there. I like the logic behind it. The offensive line, I was hoping for it to get a little bit more push up front. I think Troy Fautanu has been doing a really good job on this line. I think Broderick Jones has rebounded significantly. He's been a lot better than what he has been in weeks 1 and 2 of the season. Like, that unit overall has been a lot better. But I wish it could have got a little bit more push in the run game, especially after back-to-back games against Cincinnati and Green Bay, where the rushing attack was really working well for Pittsburgh. I wish they could have continued that momentum a little bit, but just nothing was really there on the ground for them all game. So some average grades, I guess, I'll hand out for the offense today. You know, they're passing grades, though. I guess that's all you can hope for, but there's always room for improvement, and that's what Aaron Rodgers said for this offense all around. So that's going to be my comments on the offensive grades. For the defense, very good grades. These are the ones that want to go on your mom's fridge. These are the ones that your dad's going to be happy about. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later in the show on why I'm still a little bit concerned for this unit, but they looked really, really good on Sunday. They left me very optimistic for what this unit can hopefully become moving forward in the season. The defensive line, this is an easy one, A+ here. They got some extra credit on this one. Held Jonathan Taylor, the MVP frontrunner, to just 45 yards in this game on about 14 carries. The unit had 4 sacks on Daniel Jones, so 4 out of the 5 sacks were credited to this defensive line, and I'm throwing Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt into the mix with the defensive line here because they pretty much are down linemen. They never drop back, really. It's a rare time if they do drop back. But that defensive line looked really good. As I mentioned earlier, TJ Watt's turnover was the turning point. Alex Highsmith looked really good. Nick Herbig showed some flashes. Jack Sawyer, as Mike Tomlin said, the sun always shines down on him. He's a 5-star. Got his first interception. Keanu Benton, I thought it was one of his best games from him. Like, if you're going to give credit to the defensive line, he deserves a lot of it. Cam Hayward deserves a lot of it for stopping the run. Really impressive performance from those two guys up front. And especially for Benton, too, who in his sophomore season didn't really look as good as he did in his rookie year. He hasn't really looked great to begin the year, but kind of like the offensive line, he's rebounded and has looked a lot better as of late, and especially in this game here. Linebackers, another banner day for them. I'm going to give it an A+. You know, Patrick Queen would have liked to have seen more, but this grade is more about what Peyton Wilson did. This was the best game that we saw from Peyton Wilson as a Steeler. 13 tackles, 1 interception. Granted, it wasn't pretty for Peyton Wilson earlier in the year, like many players, but he's still only in his second year in the league. Like, we have to factor that in sometimes. He's still a very young player. They thrusted him into a bigger role this season. And you know what? He stepped up on Sunday. He answered the call. 13 total tackles, an interception. Queen, a forced fumble. This unit rebounded a ton after last week's game where they let Tucker Kraft go for more than 100 yards against them. Tyler Warren was limited to 5 catches for 26 yards. The linebacker unit deserves a lot of credit for how they played on Sunday. Their best game as a year. And you know what, the defensive backs, they've been getting beat up a ton lately. Partly because of what they're doing on the field, partly due to schematics. I'm going to grade them on a curve here, and I'll explain a little bit more into that. Did they allow big plays? Yes, 230 yards to Pittman and Pierce. But this might surprise you. I'm going to give the defensive backs an A for their grade. The only 2 healthy safeties coming into this game were Jalen Ramsey. Sorry, not Jalen Ramsey. It was Juan Thornhill and Kyle Duggar, a guy who just joined the team on Wednesday. Really was trying to pick up and learn a lot of different things schematically. The team was out without Chuck Clark due to an illness, without Jabril Peppers due to an injury. This team was very inexperienced at safety for guys that knew what Pittsburgh wanted to do schematically. So they had 2 healthy safeties, Thornhill and Duggar. Thornhill didn't play at all in this game. Jalen Ramsey almost exclusively played free safety. He served in that hub of communication role that Deshaun Elliott usually serves in. And you know what? He excelled there. Before every play, I saw him chatting it up with Kyle Duggar, making sure he knew what his responsibilities were. And we have to give a lot of credit to both Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar. It's not easy doing what they did. Jalen Ramsey has almost exclusively played outside corner, slot corner for the majority of his career. He had to step up and play a role that maybe he wasn't 100% comfortable with, but he played with that edge that he preached for the team to play with. He stepped up as a leader. He showed what kind of player Jalen Ramsey can still be. Kyle Duggar just arrived on Wednesday. He had to learn a brand new scheme in a short time. But because of guys like Jalen Ramsey, who was in his ear, like Jabril Peppers, who tried to translate some of the language from New England to Pittsburgh to try and make it a little bit easier for Duggar to get acquainted with this defense, deserves credit. He played pretty well in his first game as a Steeler. Mike Tomlin compared him to Minkah Fitzpatrick for him just being traded to Pittsburgh and being able to jump on that moving train, as he likes to call it, and being able to do that really, really well when Pittsburgh was in a time of need because they didn't have guys like Chuck Clark out there. They didn't decide to throw Juan Thornhill out there. They didn't have Jabril Peppers. Like, this team was hurting at safety. But Kyle Duggar answered the call, much like the Steelers defense did all game long. We're going to go to break. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I'm still concerned about this unit. So I handed out A's pretty much all around. I thought the coaching was pretty good in this game too. Tomlin deserves credit. Terrell Austin deserves credit. Arthur Smith, it wasn't the cleanest day on offense, but they did enough to get by. Danny Smith, other than that one fake punt situation, special teams was great all game. You had that punt that was muffed the Steelers were able to recover. Chris Boswell is always phenomenal. You had the weird play where he told Boswell to kick it out of bounds to exploit a loophole in the rule that benefited the Steelers. The onside kick team was ready. I'm going to talk a little bit next about why I'm still concerned about the Steelers' defense, though. And it might be a weird topic after the game where they played their arguably best football all season on defense, at least with turnovers and sacks and all those metrics. But I'm going to explain why I'm still concerned about this unit next here on Black and Gold Overtime. Welcome back into Black and Gold Overtime. Riley Holsinger with you here for just a couple more minutes on the program. The Steelers defeated the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday, 27-20. Pittsburgh moves to 5-3, stays ahead in the AFC North, won a very pivotal game. It was important for the Steelers to win that game and not drop 3 games in a row. But the Steelers have a very important stretch coming up here. They take on, let me pull it up here. They take on the Chargers on Sunday Night Football next week. They'll end up traveling, or they'll host Cincinnati, Then they'll travel to Chicago to take on the Bears, host the Buffalo Bills, and then travel to take on the Baltimore Ravens. That is an important stretch coming up for the Steelers. They're going to have revenge games coming up against the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to have 2 tough games coming up against the Bills as well as the Baltimore Ravens. The Chargers aren't an easy out as well, although they are going to be without, it seems like, Joe Alt at tackle, Rashawn Slater at tackle. So that'll be big for the Steelers' edge rushers. But I'm still concerned about the Steelers' defense here. And I'll tell you why. It's because of Daniel Jones. Now, if you're just a box score watcher, you look at the stats from yesterday, see Daniel Jones was, 31 of 50, passed for a season-high 340 yards, had a touchdown passing, touchdown rushing. The thing that concerns me, though, is they forced 5 turnovers off Daniel Jones. That's great for the defense. But the thing that concerns me is Daniel Jones didn't look good in that game yesterday. He looked more like the Giants' Daniel Jones. And that concerns me. Is the Steelers just beating up on a Daniel Jones that maybe is bound to just turn back into a pumpkin? Like, he had a great first half of the year. Don't get me wrong. This is no disrespect to Daniel Jones, but I guess it is with what I'm saying here. I'm just concerned, is this the beginning of the Daniel Jones that we have been used to seeing? Is this the Giants' Daniel Jones that we've saw? Because he kind of looked like that on Sunday. He didn't look like the Indiana Jones that we've been used to him seeing in Indianapolis so far this season. Like, can the Steelers build off of this performance? I'm not expecting them to get 6 turnovers in a game or 5 turnovers in a game on defense, but can they at least somewhat replicate this? Get a couple turnovers against Justin Herbert. Get a turnover or 2. Can they rush him? Get a couple sacks on him, 3, 4, 5 sacks. Like, can they do this against the quarterbacks that aren't Daniel Jones, the ones that are proven in the National Football League? Like, it's one thing if you're doing this against a guy like Carson Wentz or Dylan Gabriel or Daniel Jones, but can you put together maybe a performance like this against Justin Herbert, against Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, these quarterbacks that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to see over this important stretch that they're going to have coming up? Because that is going to be the tell if this defense can truly right the ship. Can they get back to where they're supposed to be? Can they live up to that billing of being the highest paid defense in the National Football League? Like, they got to prove it to me against other teams here. And I guess, you know what? I'll play devil's advocate here as well. The Colts offensive line headed into this game as one of the best units. The Steelers really shut down that unit. It was an impressive game from the Steelers defensive line by really eliminating one of the best offensive lines in the National Football League. So maybe the credit has to go more towards the Steelers defense, but I'm just not willing or ready to hand them an apology just yet, because you know what? We've saw a lot of bad football from the Steelers defense this season. Mike Tomlin said this is still the same team that stunk last week, but can they look more like the team that they did on Sunday as they move forward? That's all the time that we have for Black and Gold Overtime. I'm Riley Holsinger. Thanks so much for watching and enjoy the rest of your Victory Monday.